Jerry Monty reports on the Act of Remembrance commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Arnhem.
In the plane we got a lot of flak up and she started to rock a lot. I thought, heck, we better get out of this a bit fast. I hope it won't be long now. And as we were shuffling towards the door, a flash like came to me and said, what the blazes am I doing here? It was a long time for a paratrooper who is lightly armed. He wants to be in and out. But they promised us the relief, and it would be there. And we thought, well, let's have a go.
I don't think there's ever been a battle like it. A lot of soldiers will tell me, of course, that they fought battles equally as tough or maybe even tougher. But in my experience, I've never seen, and I don't want to see again, a battle anywhere resembling that. It was sheer murder. It was just kill or be killed.
Firing from almost every street. It was indescribable. Towards the end of the battle, there was walls falling down, houses on fire, there was men lying around dead, and personally I could see all the area burning, and my head was absolutely banging with untreated gunshot wounds. To me, no wonder the people called it the Witch's Cauldron.
The ferry from Dover is a comfortable start for a return visit to Arnhem, but for all ex-1st British Airborne troops, the trip can still bring pain and tears. 10,000 of them arrived in the Dutch town out of the September skies 40 years ago. Nearly 4 out of 5 of them were dead, wounded or captured within 9 days. No one who was there escaped the scars of Arnhem. It's haunted their nights and it's shaped their days ever since. For one ex-glider pilot, the pull of Arnhem has drawn him across the world from Australia. Memory is a strong magnet. With the Germans crumbling in France, Allied leaders were looking for a quick breakthrough to end the war. The elite troops of the British Airborne Corps, Americans, Poles and British, were Eisenhower's final strategic reserve, coins burning holes in the planners' pockets. Montgomery got his way for the final thrust. Operation Market Garden was on. The plan was simple: 30 Corps armor to race across a carpet of airborne troops who would seize vital bridges. The Americans at Eindhoven and Nijmegen, the British and Poles to take Arnhem. It all depended on speed up the road. 64 miles in 2 days, it might come off. This time to Arnhem, the wives come too. And 2 old soldiers can look back on a long friendship.
43 years, yes. 43 years ago. And what happened then after?
The water went under Arnhem Bridge instead.
I bet, yeah.
I wanted to forget the whole episode because I think that all of us who had been in Arnhem and through the battle wanted to forget the awful experience that each one of us had. And after all those years, I couldn't actually forget it, but I tried my best. But eventually, I said to myself, well, there's one thing I would like to do before my life comes to an end, is to go back to Arnhem.
On Sunday, September the 17th, 1944, the early British landings went as planned, with only slight resistance. Reconnaissance squadron troops dashed for the bridge, the infantry assembled and moved off to follow. For the Dutch, 4 years of occupation seemed at an end. The coming of the Tommies meant liberation. The Dutch wholeheartedly committed themselves to welcoming the British. For some, that welcome was tragically too soon. But on that first Sunday, it was all excitement.
I was a boy of 8 then in 44, and I was living with my parents very close to here in that direction. My father had a workshop. And at Sunday afternoon we saw all those parachutes, all different colors coming down. It was really flabbergasted to see it, because my father always told me England was a very different world from here. It was, everybody was free, and you had a lot of food there. So, you know, I saw them coming, and a lot of people were crying, in fact, here, and I was total out of my mind to see all those parachutes coming down. And the first thing I remember, they smelled very different, because the German always smelled a bit sour, I think, because of their food, their kuch, they call it, or something, and these Tommies, they smell a bit sweet, like cigarettes and chocolate, and things like that.
40 years on, that welcome is as warm and wholehearted as ever for the airborne veterans and for their wives.
How are you?
Hello. Oh, my little girl.
Hello. And dit is
Good guy, Mr. Wieland.
Anneliese.
Anneliese and Ingeborg. Where's your wife?
Yeah.
There. How are you? All right, thank you. You too.
One for you. A Welsh doll. And one for you. Hey?
Had a good trip.
Oh, I love it. We live in Wales now, you see.
Kijk eens naar. Oh, dit is een Welse doll. Een Welse meisje. Geef ze een kus, Annelies. Bedankt.
Good girl.
En die mevrouw.
But even a heartfelt welcome needs some planning. This year, the Dutch Lest We Forget organisation housed over 900 ex-airborne visitors in local people's homes. More than 100 guests made the trip wholly at Dutch expense. The figures are high because this, the 40th, is the last official commemoration.
You see, what these people did 40 years ago for us is still remembered, and we're still thankful for that. And we want them to feel that they are welcome, as long as they come, as long as they live, and as long as we live. And of course, it goes further than that, our work, because we think that the Battle of Arnhem is not only the commemoration of a battle, very gallantly fought, but also a sign of liberty regained and freedom. The price that was paid for freedom was very high. You can see that in the Airborne cemetery.
But the main thrust to the bridge stalled, though 2 para under Colonel John Frost had taken the northern end. The bulk of the airborne were held up some 8 miles away around the landing zones. As some Allied intelligence assessments had warned, 2 panzer divisions were in the area and reacting quickly. The Cauldron was already beginning to boil.
It was near the waterfront at the bottom of the bridge, and the Germans was on top. Their infantry was behind half tracks. So we was firing, 4 of us behind a jeep and a trailer, and we were firing at the German infantry, and the Germans retaliated, and they hit us with a direct hit with a mortar. Well, the next thing I know, I was spinning in the air, and I appeared to drop down, go up again. I was screaming mortar bombs, dropping all around. My head was as if you was hitting it with a sledgehammer. I could feel the blood running out of my mouth, and I failed to move my legs. I believe it was a complete turning point in my life. I was turned overnight from a young man into probably what I'd call an old man.
Arnhem was now ablaze, airborne elite against Germans on the doorstep of their fatherland. 30 corps were overdue, but frost was holding. The main force was now boxed into the suburbs of Oosterbeek. Pressed on 3 sides, the airborne had their backs to the Rhine. The ferocity of the fighting was turning the battle into what the Germans themselves called the Witches' Cauldron.
Well, it was house-to-house fighting. They were one side of the road, normal suburban areas, just an ordinary estate that you'd find just here now outside. They would come in from one side of the street, we would come in from the other side of the street. We would try to hold. Normal firing we could hold. We could hold our rifle firing, we could hold Sten, Bren and Peets and grenades. We managed quite well with it. We did the job we were trying to do in those areas because this was the kind of thing. The Sten was a close quarters weapon, and we were firing from 30 yards, I suppose, and maybe even less. Throwing grenades into these little back doors and hope they'd do the damage we hoped they would do. But of course, the unfortunate thing for us, the Jerrys had the equipment that could come along and smash house by house, and this is what was happening. As one house was smashed, we vacated it, usually before they could knock us off, or may have caught 1 or 2, and we'd have had to leave them there or drag them away best we could, and go to the next house and defend that one. We defended from these windows here. That window wasn't there. That part of the building wasn't there, but there was windows in that side of the wall, and we were defending from there, round the back, each side. Eventually, of course, the whole building was shattered, blown to bits. We were still inside there, and we moved to the next building, and from there on, down the street, the same thing happened from house to house. I don't think we worried about the people we killed, the Germans we killed. Half the time, we didn't know whether we killed them or not. We fired at persons. We see some fall. We assumed they would either be dead or certainly out of action. But you had no qualms about it. They were there to be killed. They were killing us. And they were killing us in far greater numbers than we at the time were able to kill them.
We've fought them before in Italy, the Panzer Division, this particular Panzer Division we were in contact with. And we had a mutual respect for them, and I think they had a mutual respect for us as well. And, well, we got on with the job. Our job there was to do battle, and we did battle. And that was it. There was no quarter asked and none given.
When the second day's drop came in, 1st British Airborne was almost complete. The outlook optimistic. The newly arrived jeeps were ready to exploit any weakening in the German ring around Frost at the bridge. But resistance around the landing zones was stiffening.
We got down into this wood by the railway and dug in and got ready for a big shoot. And they shelled us now with these Morning Minis and the 88s. It was very unpleasant. But we had dug in, but most of the crew got hit, and including myself in the hip. And our mortar was, well, I couldn't see it anyway. From there then, I had a morphine injection, that's right, and seemed to pass out.
And later he woke up, his wounds being treated in the mental hospital at Wolfhazy, hidden from the Germans among a group of wounded inmates.
For 40 years, we bottled up. And it bottled up so long, things that happened, that you begin to disbelieve that you disbelieve that it ever happened. It ever happened.
For Jack and all the other airborne veterans who return, Arnhem and the surrounding area is still alive with ghosts and terrifying memories. So is it good for them to go back?
it's a good thing for Jack and the other Arnhem veterans to come back to Oosterbeek and Arnhem to revisit the places where they have gone through such terrible experiences during the days of 44. I'm sure quite a number of them have not been able to talk about it or even to think about it, and must have suppressed all those emotions and events and tried to keep them out of their lives. And professionally speaking, people cannot keep important things out of their lives forever. They will work and they will cause symptoms and complaints for the men themselves, but I think very often for their surroundings too. If those emotions are strong enough and strongly suppressed, they prevent people from developing the personality they could have been without it.
One night, I nearly strangled my wife. I thought I was back during the war, fighting. I was getting vivid memories of being in the cellar and all the shells falling. That's eased up as the years have gone by, but it is still there.
I started to have dreams, nightmares, and they were nightmares. I'd wake up screaming, and my wife would be trying to wake me up, so she tells me at times, because I was fighting in bed with myself and trying to fend off what I was dreaming of. And the dream was based on the same theory all the time, the same kind of thing. It appeared that I was surrounded, I was in a spot, and enemy, whoever they might have been, were trying to get me, specifically me, and only me. And they were after me, and I used to wake up screaming.
Sleeping was a bit of a problem. My wife will verify that. Used to wake up in sweats, and she said, "Stop it, will you? You're screaming again. You're waking the children up."
The Hartenstein Hotel in Oosterbeek was divisional headquarters, its gardens swept by sniper fire and a rain of mortar bombs. Now it's a museum to the battle, a place of pilgrimage for a glider pilot once wounded just outside.
Oh, it's undoubtedly a tragic waste of young life. But if one wanted to be objective, at the time, we were anxious to go on this operation. We'd had 16 operations planned and aborted. Some of them were very sporting in concept, and we felt that this operation had a 50-50 chance of success. And of course, I'm no military strategist or politician, but there is a school of thought that thinks if the operation had been successful, the war would have been over in 1944, and the map of Europe would have been different than it is today.
The history of war is the history of if only. If only the Airborne could have retrieved the supplies so heroically delivered. If only the Germans hadn't overrun the drop zones. Even cigarettes would have been a godsend, but by now the Airborne were desperate for food, ammunition and medical supplies. 30-Corps armour was still overdue, and German reinforcements poured into the Cauldron.
What are you telling us to do? Don't move, don't stop again. No, I've no film left. Think about
Well, I suppose it's a fact of life and experience that privation and difficulty breeds comradeship. And there's no doubt about it that we did go through a very rough time in September 1944. And there were a lot of casualties, and people, those that got out, were lucky to survive. And the very fact that people did survive makes them feel that they want to come back and renew their contacts with the battle. And the remarkable thing is that the Dutch regard this as their battle too, not only ours. Because as a result of our having to withdraw, the Dutch went through a winter of absolute hell. they still refer to that winter as the hunger winter. And they really had hell. So in every cause to loathe our guts. Because by our failure, we caused them such frightful difficulties. But should never have worried, because it was quite fantastic how everybody went out of their way to say how pleased they were to see us.
After 3 days and 4 nights, Frost and his men were overrun at the bridge. Harry Thompson was moved to Arnhem's main hospital. The St. Elizabeth Hospital had been taken by the Germans, though battle still raged around and sometimes even through it. A returning former medical orderly, William Roberts, has been making a pilgrimage to the hospital chapel.
When we arrived at the St. Elizabeth Hospital, and I was in the surgical team, and there were already some wounded in the hospital, sitting on the stairs. And the more you mingled around with the wounded, you could see the terrible torture on their faces, and especially the ones with shell shock. And they didn't know what to do or say, and it was a terrible job to try and comfort them. And then the outside, the noise was terrific with the rattle of gunshots and blasts, I think, of the shells. And down the road by the T-junction, there was a crossfire, I think, and soldiers were being mown down. And we tried to collect as many wounded as we could. And the smell, I don't know, it was a sour, rancid smell that you get with dirt and blood and dead bodies.
That sour, rancid smell was now like a cloud over the battleground. By Monday, September the 25th, 30 Corps armour, despite heroic sacrifice, was 6 days overdue. In Oosterbeek, units were fighting to the last man in gardens and ditches. It was German armour against small arms and flesh and blood. But the route to the Rhine was still open, and the order to withdraw put quietly into effect. Exhausted men slipping down through the woods at night between tapes laid by glider pilots. It was very nearly all over.
It was bucketing down with rain. We were soaking wet, queuing Dunkirk fashion across the fields here. There's a fair amount of mortar landing actually in the river. But it seemed to be downstream more from us. We weren't getting it where the actual evacuation was taking place. We were all a bit disappointed with being dragged out. It was mixed feelings. We didn't really want to go. We felt so much had been wasted. But I can tell you, we were damn glad to get the other side of that river. We really were. We did get out.
But many stayed forever. The Airborne, ordered to hold for 2 days, had held for 9. For the Dutch, homes smashed and thousands dead, German retribution was swift. Everyone was moved out of Oosterbeek to survive as best they could in the hungry winter. It was the following spring before they could repair their homes. But what of the men who'd fought there? How could they rebuild their lives?
All I know is that for a little while after the battle itself, I was mentally very dumb and dull. I couldn't think straight. Possibly I can't think straight now, but I certainly couldn't at that time. One was literally numbed mentally.
Well, I was a very happy married man, but my wounds had ruined my life. I was a tradesman and a coppersmith with a very good firm in England. But after about a month, I couldn't stand the noise of the machinery in the factory, so I voluntarily left. I then came to Wales, settled down, and I was a caretaker of a workman's club, where my wife was doing most of the work.
It was in this place that I made my mind up that I would, if I ever got the opportunity, that I would enter the ministry, because I think that the loss of life to such an extent is not worth it, not for anything on earth.
Well, from 1946, demobbed in January 46, went back to my old job in Morris's in Cowley, Oxford, and couldn't settle in. Stayed there 2 or 3 months and just couldn't settle in. And in the course of that 12 months probably, I turned over about 6 or 7 jobs in that period of time. Just couldn't settle down to normal civilian and working life. After being so long in these services and trying to do a specific job, we weren't ready for civilian way of life again.
No way I've got hard feelings. In fact, I know in my mind, if it had come off and we'd done our part, the war would have been over 6 months earlier. I don't hesitate to think it.
It left you the feeling of being everlastingly fireproof. You know, that was it. You got through that lot. There wasn't much else that life could throw at you.
I feel very grateful to be alive, and I feel that I've had 40 good years, which were bonus years. With the average fortunes of war, I suppose, I could have been in the cemetery with those other mates of mine.
My wife reckoned that I did alter a lot when I come back. Realization, I think that I appreciated the simple things of life more than I used to, and it boils down to the fact, I think, that we're apt to lose that feeling too often. We should appreciate more and look about us and be thankful.
Am I glad I went to Arnhem? I'm proud to be a person who took part in the Battle of Arnhem, because it's a battle that will go down in history. It'll be something that so few fought against such great odds to relieve people of the tyranny of the Germans. Yes, I'm proud that I did go there. I'm proud to have taken part in it, and above all, I'm proud to be a para.